Elizabeth Siders, the mother of 16 children accused of hiding her children and causing them serious harm, wants out of jail. But the prosecutor says Elizabeth should stay put. I'll tell you all of the reasons why.
One detail in this case raises a troubling question. The woman at the center of a case involving 16 children, prosecutors say were hidden from public view, was the only one not handcuffed in her family's booking video. And the prosecutor just told a judge, in writing, that new felony charges are coming before a grand jury even sees this case. For nearly 2 months now, a family in rural Ohio has been at the center of a case involving 16 children prosecutors have described as hidden. This is the case of Elizabeth Siders, a mother of 16, and her family. Elizabeth has been sitting in the Vinton County jail since June 30th. Her husband, Gary Siders Jr., is still in there with her. So is her mother-in-law, Christina Siders. Only one member of this family walked free, Gary Siders Sr., the 73-year-old grandfather, released on a signature bond because of a serious medical condition the county reportedly could not afford to treat behind bars. Now Elizabeth wants out too. Her attorney filed for a bail modification, arguing that she does not have the money to post bail and proposing a GPS monitor instead. But Prosecutor William Archer said no. Not just no. He put it in writing, and his reasoning raises more questions than it answers. Here's the detail that stopped me. Buried in that filing, almost as an afterthought, Archer wrote that Elizabeth is facing new, serious felony charges that will be presented to a grand jury.
Here's what Prosecutor William Archer said when asked whether Elizabeth was a victim at a press conference back on July 8th.
According to her attorney, she's not a victim. So we'll let him decide how he wants to address his representation of her.
So it doesn't appear at this point that William Archer's opinion has changed because he has formally objected to any modification of Elizabeth's bond as it stands right now. Archer wrote in a memorandum opposing the request for bail modification, this court should deny the bond modification for several reasons. First, the defendant is facing multiple serious pending charges, multiple F2s involving serious physical harm to her children, and thus is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case. Second, the defendant has filed a competency motion. Consequently, she is at personal risk until her competency is known. Third, the defendant has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. Did you catch that last part? William Archer wrote that Elizabeth Siders has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. That sounds like those charges are in addition to the 16 child endangering charges she already faces.
New charges. Not a clarification of the 16 child endangering counts she already faces. Additional ones. He didn't say what they are, at least publicly. That detail remains unknown. If you noticed that detail before I said it out loud, you were paying closer attention than most people watching this unfold on the news. So let's go back to the beginning, because several details surrounding Elizabeth have raised a question that still hasn't been answered. When Elizabeth was booked into jail on June 30th, reporters noted she was the only adult in her family who appeared not to be placed in handcuffs. Her body language, described by observers in that booking video, was markedly different from her husband's and her mother-in-law's. Shoulders rounded, posture hunched, by most accounts visibly frightened. Paired with the fact that she had 18 children over roughly 18 years, it's understandable that some people watching this case immediately ask, is she a victim here too?
In the booking video of Elizabeth from June 30th, she was noticeably the only Siders family member who wasn't handcuffed. Just looking at her, her body language appeared to be much different from her husband's and her in-laws. She cowered, her shoulders were rounded, and she was practically hunched over. She seemed scared. This, coupled with how Elizabeth appeared in court and in her booking photo, and the fact that she had 18 children over about 18 years, made people wonder and question whether Elizabeth was the victim of something nefarious. When asked by a local TV station whether Elizabeth Siders was a victim, her lawyer, Tommy Stolley, said Elizabeth didn't consider herself a victim, but he was still looking into that possibility.
Her own attorney, Tommy Staley, wouldn't rule it out. When a local station asked directly whether Elizabeth considered herself a victim, Staley said she didn't, but that he was still looking into it. Elizabeth reportedly does not consider herself a victim, although her attorney said he was still looking into that possibility. Prosecutor Archer, for his part, has been consistent. Back on July 8, when asked the same question at a press conference, he essentially deferred to her attorney's framing and moved on. He hasn't budged since. And if anything, the language in his bail objection makes the state's position harder, not softer. Here's where the case escalates. Archer's memo doesn't just call Elizabeth a flight risk in general terms. It specifically ties that risk to the severity of what she's already charged with. 16 second-degree felonies, each carrying up to 8 years. Do that math. She is reportedly facing the possibility of decades behind bars. That alone, prosecutors argue, gives her more reason to run than most defendants ever have.
As things stand right now, we know what we know. We know that the 16 children were taken from the house on June 30th. We know that that 3 of the adults remain in jail. The children are in therapeutic foster care. This prosecutor knows a whole heck of a lot more than we do. He knows the inner workings of the investigation, what brought them there in the first place. He is calling Elizabeth a flight risk. Her attorney, on the other hand, has said that she doesn't have any money. She can't post bail, so you should just let her out and put a GPS bracelet on her. So is there maybe something this prosecutor is hearing on jail calls that she's might be saying to family members that's really raising his concern that she could potentially flee?
Well, I'm quite sure he's listening to any jail calls by her as well as the others. They're permitted to do that and have a big sign next to the jail telephone that the calls are monitored. Typically, they don't listen to phone calls between the defendant and their own lawyer, but if
Sure.
he's on there talking to family or friends, they are picking that up.
And ask yourself this. If the state didn't believe there was more to this story, why would Vinton County be pushing this hard, this fast, for permanent, not temporary, custody of 16 children? According to former prosecutor Ron O'Brien, cases like this ordinarily start with temporary custody, while the state investigates further. In this case, however, the county is seeking permanent custody.
I think you're exactly correct. This case, ordinarily, this kind of case, even though this is a case of its own, exclusive kind, a case like this starts with a request for temporary custody to children's
Correct.
services, either on an emergency basis or otherwise. And then you do an investigation, you see what you have, and then you look at the family unit and look at relatives or others that the child might be placed at. But here they're starting off right from the get-go, seeking permanent custody, which again, as you say, says to everyone concerned that we don't think reunification with the parents of these children, the way they've been treated, is ever going to be in the best interest of those children.
And that's the legal standard in the state of Ohio, is the best interest of the child. It is in most states, I believe. What is in the best interest of the child? And there must be some evidence that we are not privy to that goes beyond these are just poor people living in extreme poverty, because that's what a couple of the defense attorneys have said thus far. They're just poor. They're living in extreme poverty. Ron, they're not in school. They're not going to school. They're moving around to avoid children's services. Does this not signal to you that this goes beyond just being impoverished?
Certainly. I think there's very much information below the radar that we don't know yet, but we will find out when the case goes to court that would indicate that the state believes that no time in the future should mom or dad or their grandparents have access to these children that have been so neglected for so many years.
That suggests how seriously the state views the allegations. It is a county telling a judge, before the full investigation is public, that it is taking the allegations seriously and is seeking permanent custody rather than temporary custody. Then there's grandmother Christina, Her attorney also filed for bail modification. But notice what's missing from the state's objection to her release: no mention of new charges. Only 2 reasons were given for keeping her in: the serious pending charges, and the argument that she is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims.
So Grandma, Christina, William Archer says, we have not 3 reasons like we do with Elizabeth to oppose a bail modification for her, but we have 2 reasons. And the first is a similar reason. It says she's facing multiple serious pending charges, the F2s for child endangering involving serious physical harm to the grandchildren, and thus is a flight risk. So he's saying Grandma is also a potential flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case.
And at least it seems to me that the same rules apply to all of them, except perhaps maybe the grandfather, who seems to have sufficient mental health issues that he may not share the same kind of either flight risk or threat of harm to the victims or witnesses. But it seems to me that all of them are facing decades as a potential prison sentence. And they're also on notice that the state is going to seek permanent custody of the children. So when you ask yourself, what reason do they have to stick around looking at decades in prison, there's very few reasons that they have to stick around.
He does not say in here that Grandma is going to face serious new charges as he did with Elizabeth. So is it possible that she only faces those 16 child endangering charges? He obviously left that out of the opposition to her bail modification. What does that say to you?
Well, it says that mom and likely dad are the primary offenders here, and grandma and grandpa were in the house and maybe didn't take control, maybe didn't prevent them from causing the atmosphere that existed. But it sounds to me like they're more passive participants than active participants.
And then we also have the competency issue that William Archer writes about, that basically she's at personal risk until her competency is known, because that's been raised by her counsel.
Right. And at least in terms of competency, they want to be assured that she's not a risk of harm to herself or to others. And that is something that would be looked into during the competency exam. And so at this point, I can see why they are saying, look, let's look at this. There's competency issues. There's flight risk. There's a potential harm to the victims. All this together, let's just keep her in jail until we see where we are. I'm interested to see how soon they may take it to the grand jury.
If the county believed Christina was facing the same escalating case Elizabeth is, wouldn't they say so? The omission itself is interesting, though it does not confirm exactly what Christina's role was or what additional charges, if any, she may face. Former prosecutor Ron O'Brien suggested that Elizabeth and likely Gary Siders Jr. may be viewed as the primary offenders, while the grandparents may have been more passive participants who failed to prevent what was happening. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's own competency has been formally questioned. A judge has ordered an evaluation, not just for basic fitness to stand trial, but to determine whether a mental illness could support a finding of not guilty by reason of insanity. That detail alone could reshape everything about how this case is prosecuted, and how the public understands what allegedly happened inside that home for nearly 2 decades.
There's also another little tidbit of information in here, very interesting and very important bit of information regarding Elizabeth Siders. The prosecutor says that she's already facing these 16 charges of child endangering, and these are F2s. And that includes causing, basically serious harm to a child. It's neglect, not providing a safe environment, causing serious physical harm, things of that nature. But he's saying when this goes to grand jury, he's going to ask the grand jurors to indict her on new charges. So that makes me think this is in addition to those 16 child endangering charges. what does that say to you? Because I don't know what other charges. My mind is spinning. What other charges could Elizabeth Siders face aside from child endangering?
Well, that was the most striking thing in the memo that the state filed opposing reduction in bond. And I think it's showing some cards to the public as well as to defense counsel that look, you're looking at child endangering cases, but there's more coming and it's more serious. And that is also why she might try and flee. And that's also why she might try and reach her children to talk to them, to influence them one way or another in what their statements may be in relating to the endangering children, but any other offenses that may have occurred while they're locked in this small room for many years. The key to this, I think, is, among other things, is it's long going. It wasn't just one discrete child endangering where a mother burned a child on the arm, and that's the basis for the single child endangering. This went on for years where they weren't sent to school, where they were locked up, that they weren't allowed out, that their life was very much restricted. All those things add up to an equation of a long standing neglect and abuse that below the radar should add up to something more than what we know.
What we know for certain is this: 16 children were removed from that house on June 30th. They are currently in therapeutic foster care. 3 adults remain behind bars. 1 is out because of his serious medical condition. And a prosecutor who has access to information the public doesn't has decided, in writing, that Elizabeth should not walk free yet. I keep coming back to one detail that has nothing to do with charges or filings. Somewhere in that jail, Elizabeth Siders has reportedly been receiving care packages and asking whether she can pass them along to the children she hasn't seen since the day they were taken.
William Archer also said that Elizabeth is a potential risk to the victims in this case. Now, these potential victims, the 16 children ranging in age from age 18 to 1.5, they're all in therapeutic foster care. So there, you would hope that, she's not going to be able to learn their location since she is accused of endangering the children. But this is interesting to me that a prosecutor thinks she's a potential risk to their safety after her lawyer, Tommy Stolle, has said publicly, like, she wants to be reunited with her children. She loves her children. She's getting care packages at the jail and she's asking, can I give this stuff to my kids? So it sounds to me like there's a lot here under the surface that we don't know about. When you read between the lines of this, what does it say to you?
Well, I think just by virtue of the fact that she is suggesting she wants reunited with the children, that should she be released, that she might make a effort to have contact with them. Obviously, the placements for the children would not be known, but given the whole very bizarre circumstances surrounding this case, they probably have a concern that she might try and find out where the children are. Obviously, a proposed ankle monitor. We all know ankle monitors fairly regularly get, at least I have had defendants cut them off their ankle and they're
Mhm.
no longer subject to monitoring, which would fit into their argument regarding flight as well as attempt to contact the children.
Whatever the full truth of this case turns out to be, that image sits uncomfortably next to everything else in this file. Former prosecutor Ron O'Brien estimated that the grand jury could hear this case before Labor Day.
Because they typically have 60 days from the time it's bound over to the grand jury, and they've already consumed, probably a month maybe.
Mhm.
In any event, they need to start getting the case together to present to the grand jury. And at that point, we will see what additional charges that have been waved around are included in the indictment.
Ron, you read my mind. because that was going to be my next question to you. When do you see this case going to grand jury? Because it's been quite a bit of time now. Is this a case where maybe they only want to go once? They don't want to have to go back to the grand jury, on a continuing basis?
I think that's exactly right. I think they want to have what they are going to proceed on included in the single indictment against all defendants and include all counts against each individual defendant. And they have a clock, at least under the rules of superintendents, of 60 days from the time a case is bound over from municipal court to common pleas court. And in this case, that is they're probably close to 40 anyhow, and or more. And so at this point in time, I would think that it should go to the grand jury probably before Labor Day.
Well, we shall see because we're all watching that calendar and we'll see what happens. Ron O'Brien, thank you so much for your time and your expertise as always.
Thank you, and very good to talk to with you.
When it does, we'll find out exactly what new serious felony charges means, and whether the answer changes how this entire family is seen. So here's what I want to know from you. Based on what's been filed so far, do you think Elizabeth Siders is a co-defendant here, or is there a chance, however small, that she was living under circumstances the public does not yet fully understand? Drop your read on it in the comments. And when those new charges are formally presented, I'll be back with exactly what they say. Because I don't think this is the last.